It was January of 2016. My buddies and I live right next to a nature preserve and used to love to explore it. It was a weekend and we were looking for something to do, and being mischievous, we decided to go explore the storm drain that supplied water to the creek in the nature preserve. It had a barred barricade blocking entry into it, so we decided we'd throw some rocks in to see if the rocks made contact at any point so we could figure out the depth. However, we received something much more in return. After throwing a rock against the wall in the storm drain, a couple seconds passed, and we heard a terrifying thump or bang in return.
What the hell?
Dusk was approaching, so we called it a day and watched back over the video we recorded of it. The next weekend, I gathered a few more buddies, and we decided we would unbolt the barricade to the drain and go inside. I got the barricade to fall down, and we made our entrance. It went in about 20 feet until it hit a dead end. However, there was a second branch of the drain to our left that we'd have to take a step up to get into. We proceeded in one by one, all 5 of us. At first, it was nothing but spider webs and mud. We traveled about 500 to 1,000 feet into the drain as it kept getting skinnier, and we had to duck to proceed. We were all frozen in our tracks as we heard the same exact thump we heard the weekend before. A scary and hard to describe sound. We had no signal and were beyond terrified at that point because we were all right next to each other and the noise had come from much further away. At this point, my friend decided to start recording in case anything else happened. We made it out of the drain safely without anything else happening. The scariest and most chilling part of this whole story was when I reviewed the video and saw a slight outline of a head at one of the turns of the drain. This couldn't possibly have been one of us because we had all been together. I took a screenshot of it and zoomed in as far as I could. And well, I was horrified. There in the frame was a demon-shaped looking head with glowing eyes and what appeared to be pointy ears. To this day, we have never gone back into that nature preserve, let alone the storm drain. It all started when a group of friends and I decided to start exploring abandoned warehouses due to the stories and myths surrounding them in our hometown, Laredo, Texas. The story surrounding the area of warehouses was that the buildings were haunted due to immigrant workers being worked and mistreated to death. The local news covered the death of many of the workers. Many of the deaths were also ignored by the authorities due to the illegal status of the workers. In the warehouse that we visited, the company was in charge of the maintenance of the railroad tracks as well as the disposing of hazardous material. In the video I recorded, the barrels filled with chemical wastes are seen spilled open. The warehouses are located in a part of town where there's nothing really around except for train tracks. The predominantly Hispanic culture of my city gave rise to the stories about railroad workers that had lost their lives in the area. We decided to explore the warehouse during the day and then during the night. On our daytime exploration, we found remains of what seemed to be remnants of satanic rituals because we found a chicken's foot and pentagrams drawn in permanent marker. We figured that was the work of local groups trying to communicate with the damned souls of the workers. We also spotted a makeshift couch or bed where the workers would sleep. The night we visited, we had the feeling we were being watched. We were actually also being followed and attacked by crows inside the building.
Oh, no, man. ¿Qué son?
While we were exploring that night, on several occasions, we spotted shadows and heard noises throughout the area. As we delved deeper, we got the feeling that someone or something didn't want us in the warehouse. A creepy laugh can be heard in the video footage I captured, and that was our cue to get the hell out.
Nada. I don't think there's no power.
Oh my god. Did you hear that?
Yeah. Let's just get out of here.
Things only got weirder though, as the satanic drawings and the chicken foot were gone the next time we passed that spot, yet they were spotted only earlier that day. I'm completely convinced that someone or something was stalking us in that warehouse that night. I believe the lost souls of the workers, or a satanic group of people that frequented the place, were there that night with us, watching. As we walked out of the warehouse, we noticed that the crows were very on edge and tried to attack us, like I mentioned earlier. The events that happened that night still sometimes keep me up at night. I'm a freshman at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Some friends of mine came home from a hockey party after their game and asked me to come hang at their dorm. They brought some girls to the party that they knew from high school and happened to be in the city. They came back to the dorm to hang as well. One of the girls that came in was super friendly but very drunk. I didn't see her drink anything in the dorms. I left with my girlfriend at about 2 a.m. At around 3, I heard sirens and could see lights outside of my window. I figured it was just another kid that came home with alcohol poisoning. Then I heard the most gut-wrenching scream of my life. I walked out of my room and saw my friends from the dorm I had just left running down the hall wanting my help. I started running down the hall following them and saw blood on the floor and thought for sure someone had been stabbed. Then I saw 3 police officers and a paramedic team strapping the friendly girl down to a stretcher while she was screaming and thrashing. I went to ask my friends what happened and they looked exhausted. They said her eyes rolled back into her head. She started growling and bleeding heavily from both nostrils. She attacked some of our friends, yanking their hair and biting them like an animal. This girl fought off 3 6-foot-tall, fairly muscular guys by herself. Keep in mind, this girl is probably 5'1", 110 pounds, and was possessing superhuman strength, all while screaming at the top of her lungs. The scariest part is when the RA came over to pray over the situation, as he's a devoted Christian, and she started screaming, "F God, F Jesus, the devil is coming for you all." At this point, my heart was sinking in pure fear of the situation, as was everyone else who was present. The emergency responders said they had never seen anything like this, even if she was possibly drugged at the party. I was able to capture a roughly 20-second video of her screaming in the dorms. You can't really see her as the paramedics are in the way, but if you listen closely towards the end of the video, you can hear her scream, "They're coming for you all, they're coming for you next." Last I heard, she woke up with no memory of the situation, but is in a very dark place at the moment. This is the video that was captured.
I wish we could count on Congressman Scott Perry.
In my small town, there's not much to do, so my friends and I make the best of it. And in the winter, we sometimes throw snowballs at cars. This was after we got done ice fishing one day. We went to my house and decided it would be fun to throw snowballs at cars for a while. Usually no one would get too angry as they were just snowballs, but one person got really mad at us. My friend Drake decided to throw a snowball at one more car and he told me to record. He hit right onto the back passenger side. It sounded like a hard hit. We stayed there for a second, laughing, until he slowed down and eventually threw it in reverse.
Yeah. He's right there.
ran and hid behind a car in a different parking lot, and he pulled in about 5 feet from us, but he didn't see us. So we ran home, and that's when I stopped recording. When we got home, we took off our jackets and sat down to watch the video I just took, but we were interrupted by this sound. I froze in my seat. Then again. I didn't think this guy would find us, but still I turned off the lights. My dogs went crazy. Drake and I are 14. We don't get scared that easily, but this was freaking us out. We hid in my bathroom in my room and turned off the light. We actually laughed, thinking he would leave in a couple minutes. Our friends thought we were joking, so we took videos of him still pounding on the door. Our friends thought it was funny and karma, but we didn't find it amusing anymore. We thought we were in danger because he wouldn't leave. So I called my mom, who was at the Walmart about 10 minutes away. She sounded more like she was angry at us for throwing snowballs at cars than concerned that someone was banging on the door. She said she would call one of the neighbors to come scare him off, and she hung up. It felt like an eternity before he stopped banging on the front door, but only a couple minutes passed, and then the banging sounds came from a different door. And it hit me that I didn't lock that door, and he could easily come in. Then I got a disturbing call from my mom, telling me one of the neighbors said she could see a deranged-looking man, possibly drugged out, looking through my room's window and the front door window. We sat there for as long as we could and decided to make a plan to get the 410 shotgun in my mom's room loaded and then make a break for it. But when we entered my mom's room to look for the gun, we saw his face at the window. His hairy, withered-looking face, and we screamed and ran. Drake had the idea to blast a police siren sound on my speaker in my room, so we ran to set the speaker up. While doing so, we heard the back door open, the one which was left unlocked. Drake managed to get the siren sound effect to play on my speaker, and that apparently worked. We heard him leave through the same door he entered. Moments later, one of the neighbors, Paul, rang the doorbell. I let him inside, and he stayed with us and waited for the cops and my mom to get there. We explained everything. The cops and my mom all said we shouldn't have been throwing snowballs at cars like that, obviously, and that we got lucky that they showed up when they did. My advice is to never mess with people like we did. You never know who you're dealing with. today's modern world of technology, communication has never been easier, no matter the timing or circumstances. However, in some cases, it may be the only determining factor between life and death. Throughout the world, the people who experience the most stress when it comes to phone calls are emergency dispatchers. Fortunately, some 911 calls end with help arriving just in the nick of time, and others end in nothing but a gut-wrenching silence in the air, along with questions that never fade away with time. These are real emergency calls that took a turn for the worse, calls that still leave a chilling impact on the operators and even the world. No reenactment, no legends, just real calls and the frightening circumstances behind them. These are real 911 calls that still haunt operators. Kyle Plush was a 16-year-old sophomore student at the Seven Hills School, Cincinnati, Ohio. He was akin to every young teen who has dreams and aspirations. However, in the most tragic turn of events, his dreams and very own life was crushed in an unforeseen accident. Unlike any other typical automotive incidents, the vehicle that Kyle was in was not even in motion. Kyle was on the Seven Hills School tennis team. On April 10th, 2018, around 3 p.m., Kyle was driving a 2004 minivan and had arrived at his school parking lot as he had a tennis match to attend. However, he never even made it to the court. What had transpired turned out to be everyone's worst nightmare and a twisted version of the movie 127 Hours. The difference was that help was so close, yet so far for Kyle Plush, and his demise only took 6 harrowing hours. Upon arriving at his destination, Kyle needed his tennis gear, which was located at the very back of the minivan. Without hesitation, he then proceeded to climb and stretch his body, going past the rows of seats until he reached the very end. Unbeknownst to him, the rear seat suddenly sprung backwards, hurling Kyle to the trunk, pinning him upside down, and his chest crushed by approximately 70 pounds of pressure. Finding himself trapped between the trunk and the folded seat, Kyle tried relentlessly to free himself. However, with the amount of weight and pressure pressing against him, he just couldn't get the strength to get himself out of the predicament he was in. Despite being in a state of panic and immense pain, Kyle still had the brilliant mind to contact emergency services. This is because he called 911 not by using his hands, but by using Siri on his phone. What was shocking was that Kyle had not made only one call, but 2 911 calls. The first one was reported to be at 3:16 p.m., pleading for help. Initially, due to the position that he was in, neither he nor the operator could understand what each other were saying. Eventually, the operator made out what Kyle was trying to say, which was, "I'm at Seven Hills, I'm gonna die here," and officers were sent to the parking lot that Kyle was located in. 2 officers were at the location at 3:26 p.m., who spent about 11 minutes patrolling the area to look for anyone in distress.
Cincinnati 911, what is the address of your emergency? Cincinnati 911. The Seven Hills what parking lot? Where are you? Hello? Hello? Where are you? Hello? Where are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's the Seven Hills parking lot. I am trapped in my garage.
Where are you?
I can't hear you. I'm in desperate need of help.
What is the address?
I'm in help. Help. I can't hear you.
Where are you? Hello?
I'm gonna die here.
Where are you?
Help!
From this call, we can hear Kyle's desperate need for help, but due to the situation he was in, it was difficult to make out what he was saying. His voice can be heard faintly saying that he was in a school parking lot, followed by thuds, multiple hellos, asking for help, and somewhat of a scream. This was then ended with a cold silence toward the end. While the officers were patrolling the school parking lot, that's when Kyle had made the second 911 call at around 3:35 p.m. This time, he was able to provide more details on the car he was in. He stated that he was in a gold 2004 Honda Odyssey. In the midst of the call, he had the chance to say, "I probably don't have much time left, so tell my mom I love her if I die." These are the words that should never be spoken by an innocent young person. In a twist of events, the information Kyle gave regarding the color, make, and model of the car that could have saved his life, that information was somehow never relayed to the officers who were present at the very parking lot that Kyle was at. At 3:37 p.m., the officers closed the incident as they did not find anyone in distress and continued on with their duty, leaving poor Kyle stranded and suffering in his minivan.
Cincinnati 911, what is the address for your emergency?
Help me.
Anyone there?
I can't hear what you're saying. Just send quickly. I probably don't have much time left to tell my mom that I love her if I die. This is not a joke. This is not a joke. I'm trapped inside my gold Honda Odyssey van in the Southwood parking lot of Seven Hills, Hillsback. Send officers immediately. I'm almost dead.
Kyle's last wish is what every parent should not hear. Even after providing the right information and the officers being so close, yet help was so far. Kyle was eventually found by his own father, Ronald Plush, around 9 p.m. in a parking lot near the school in Madisonville, about 6 hours after his first call to 911. On the eve of the 3-year anniversary of Kyle's passing, the city of Cincinnati agreed to pay $6 million to Kyle's family to settle a wrongful death lawsuit, which was the second largest settlement in the city after years of fighting for justice. Kyle's passing has since been a benchmark in the city and country to ensure that all emergency service center personnel are properly and extensively trained to ensure no unfortunate incidents such as the one Kyle had to endure would ever happen again. Some cases leave people in a state of shock, and others leave an impression that it was inevitable. The disappearance of Susan Powell in December 2009 falls in the latter category. This may seem like any other missing persons case on the surface. However, it's more comparable to a fuse burning in real time before an explosion happens, literally. In essence, Susan did not just vanish, she was taken out of the equation. Susan was a meticulous individual. That meant she documented everything she goes through, such as keeping journals, saving emails, and much more. This being the case, she was actually documenting her fears. Josh Powell, her husband, was not seen to be outwardly violent. He didn't have the typical characteristics of a serial killer. He was quiet, socially awkward, and emotionally cold, much like an unsettling character that just lingers in the background. These are most often the dangerous type of people. Josh was deemed to be the controlling type and detached with reality, all while Susan carried the heavy burdens bearing the emotional, financial, and parental weight. As Josh did his best simply drifting between jobs harboring resentful feelings, Susan's friends began to notice that she seemed odd. For example, less confident and more timid, like she was always afraid of something. In addition to this mess of a situation, there was also Stephen Powell, Josh's father, a man who was unhealthily obsessed with Susan till it crossed every imaginary boundary. Stephen would follow Susan around with a camcorder filming her. He wrote songs about her. He even spied on her using a small piece of glass while she was changing or whenever she was in the shower. Susan felt hunted, as if she was prey being stalked by a predator at all times. It doesn't help the fact that Josh is completely aware of this, however did absolutely nothing. That silence matters. In one of Susan's journals, she wrote about something so disturbing it should have raised red flags immediately. She wrote, "If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one." What's crazier is that Susan had explicitly mentioned Josh's name in her journal. It was evident that this wasn't paranoia, it was intuition sharpened by fear. She had already planned to leave, as there was proof that she researched on divorce proceedings, which meant that she was planning an exit. However, it was unfortunately short-lived and fruitless. On the night of December 6th, 2009, Susan was home with her two sons, Charlie and Braden, who at the time were 5 and 2 years old respectively. This is the turning point where life took a plunge for Susan and her sons. On the same night, Josh had apparently taken the boys out to go camping. What didn't make sense was that he decided to take them in the middle of the night in the freezing cold of winter, while it was also a school night. It was also said that Susan never followed them because she wasn't feeling well. When morning came, Susan had vanished into thin air. Her purse, phone, shoes, coat, all the things people take with them when they intend to leave, were left untouched, like she simply evaporated from the house. Following the disappearance, police arrived at her house for a welfare check, but something about the house felt wrong in a way that can't be described. There were no signs of struggle, there was just absence. Eventually, Josh returned with the kids while having a calm demeanor that's almost unsettling. Officers noticed scratches on his hands and neck, and when questioned, his answers shifted, details changed, his story bent in every different way every time it was examined. The minivan he drove tested positive for blood, however that alone was not enough to charge him. This is where the case becomes unbearable. Charlie, the older son, started saying things that don't align with Josh's stories. He told investigators things such as, "Mommy followed to the camp," "Dad took Mommy somewhere," "Mommy didn't come back." It's a known fact that kids are not good at lying. What Charlie said did not sound like imagination, but rather fragments of a memory he didn't understand. Even when presented with Charlie's claims, Josh never reacted with grief, desperation, or panic, just cold, mechanical defensiveness. Without a body, the prosecution team couldn't press charges toward Josh. He instead invoked his right to silence and refused to cooperate entirely. He then packed his kids and brought them to Washington, away from Utah and public scrutiny. Legally, he was still just the husband of a missing woman. As the investigation digs deeper, the disturbing behavior of Josh's father, Stephen Powell, comes into full view. His obsession with Susan was no longer a speculation. It was all documented in video recordings, journals, and even songs. Stephen was then arrested, but for a whole different reason. He was charged with voyeurism and He went to prison believing that Susan was still alive, still writing about her, still clinging on to sick fantasies. Seeing as how his days may be numbered, Josh left a digital will. In the will, he went on a rant about betrayal, control, and money. He also insisted he was being persecuted. However, he made one thing terrifyingly clear. He would not accept it if he lost his children. At this juncture, it wasn't a cry for help. It was a warning. By the year 2012, Josh's mental state had deteriorated. He refused psychological evaluations and isolated himself. The courts had determined that he was only allowed supervised visitation of his sons. It may seem like the best and safest solution, but it was just adding fuel to the flame. Susan's parents had fought tirelessly and desperately for custody for their grandsons because they felt something terrible was about to happen. Unfortunately, that feeling couldn't be more true. On February 5th, 2012, Josh had arrived at his rental house for a supervised visit. While this incident took place, the social worker had waited outside, which proved to be a fatal decision. Josh ushered the boys into the house, and then in a flash, closed the door and locked it. Within minutes, neighbors reported hearing screaming coming from inside the house. Josh had ruthlessly attacked his sons with a hatchet. The nightmare didn't end there. He then proceeded to pour gasoline throughout the house and ignited it. From official reports, the explosion could be heard and felt blocks away. The social worker dialed 911, but it was all too late. The fire quickly enveloped the whole house, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Both Charlie and Braden died from a combination of blunt force trauma by the hands of their own father and smoke inhalation. Josh met his demise in the fire. It was deliberate and calculated, something that indicates the way Josh intended it to be, in control, even in death.
But I think I need help right away. He's on a very short lease with DSHS, and CPS has been involved. And this is the craziest thing. He looked right at me and closed the door. And I'd like to pull out of the driveway because I smell gasoline and he won't let me in. This could be life-threatening. He went to court on Wednesday and he didn't get his kids back. And this is really, I'm afraid for their lives. He blew up the house and the kids. He slammed the door in my face. So I kept knocking. I thought it was a mistake. Kids were one step ahead of me. They're 5 and 7. They were one step ahead of me, and he slammed the door in my face.
Only after Josh's death, the prosecutors had decided to say what everyone already knew. Josh Powell murdered Susan Powell. The case was tragically closed without Susan's remains ever being found to this day, nor will she ever be found. Susan's parents later sued the state and won. This had a positive impact in how child services handle high-risk domestic violence cases. It was justice. However, it came far too late. Growing old is a natural process in life. No one or nothing can stop it. All we can afford to do is sit back and enjoy the ride. At 76 years old, Loretta Pickard is not expected to be able to run, climb, or do anything anyone under the age of 60 is able to do. She was trapped in her own body. On the ill-fated night that her house caught on fire, she couldn't manage to escape on her own, so she did the only thing she was able to do at her frail age. She called 911. For nearly 20 dreadful minutes, Loretta stayed on the phone, calm and frightened, as smoke filled her home. Firefighters arrived outside. Loretta Pickard lived alone in Lakeland, Florida. She was recovering from a hip surgery she just had and relied on her walker as the only means of getting from room to room. Every step was slow and painful. Speed was never an option, even on a good day. And on this night, speed was the determining factor between life and death. When smoke first appeared on the evening of November 23rd, 2018, Loretta didn't hesitate. She didn't waste time and never assumed it would pass. She immediately called for help. From the moment the line connected, Loretta explained her situation clearly. She told the dispatcher she was in the house. She told them she was alone and that she was on her walker. She also told them she could not get out by herself. She was not hysterical, nor was she screaming. She was calm and precise. She depended on any ability she had left to stay calm and composed so that she could deal with the situation she was in. The whole circumstance made the 911 call so much harder to listen to. As minutes passed, the smoke thickened. The dispatcher kept reassuring her again and again that help was coming. Sirens could be heard in the distance, and for a moment, allowed Loretta to feel like there was a chance that she could be able to survive the predicament without as much as a singed hair. At one point, her voice cracked just enough to reveal the fear underneath her trembling breath. "They know I'm in here, right?" she asked. Then even quieter, "They're coming for me, aren't they?" Fire crews arrived while Loretta was still alive. They were just outside her home, ready to barge in and save her. They had hoses, gear, radios, and training drilled into them for moments exactly like this. And yet, no one went in. For roughly 8 agonizing minutes, firefighters were at the scene while Loretta remained inside the actively burning house. She was still on the phone, conscious, waiting, and hanging on to the reassuring words and sounds of sirens. All the readily available tools and manpower to save her, but no confirmed rescue attempt was made. That 8-minute window is where the story becomes unbearable. because fires don't wait and smoke doesn't care about procedures. Later investigations would uncover what went wrong, which surprisingly wasn't one simple mistake. It was many stacked together. Somehow critical information didn't move the way it should have. Some firefighters were never clearly informed that a helpless old lady was trapped inside. A system that should have displayed that fact wasn't working properly. Words that could have saved a life got lost between screens. Under normal circumstances, protocol took priority over urgency. This bears the meaning that firefighters abide by a rule called 2 in, 2 out. This was designed to ensure their safety during breaching operations. However, that rule was an exception when someone's life was in danger. Loretta was in immediate danger, and the exception was never used. On the other end of the line, Loretta was still being reassured that help was indeed coming. Firefighters were there, and she was in fact not alone. But reassurances don't put out a fire. As the call continued, Loretta's voice weakened. Her words became slower and her breathing became more and more labored. The house was no longer just on fire, it was consuming the air itself. It's a tough listen as Loretta screamed in agony before the dreaded silence came. When firefighters finally entered the house, Loretta Pickard was already dead. What transpired next only made the story darker and more infuriating. Investigators later revealed that a fire captain on scene had recorded a Snapchat video of the burning house while the incident was still active, and of course, while Loretta was still inside. The video rightfully ignited public outrage and became a symbol of how attention had drifted away from the suffering old lady being trapped in flames. A 242-page independent investigation followed the incident. It laid everything out: the communication failures, hesitation, and recklessness. The fire chief promptly stepped down and resigned shortly after the incident, and the county approved a settlement for Loretta's family. However, all of this could have been avoided in the first place. Nothing anyone can do can bring back the life of a deceased, but because of it, policies changed, training was updated, and protocols were rewritten. The 911 call was not the only thing that made this case a haunting one. She believed rescue was only moments away, and she sadly passed believing that.
Are the flames getting near you? Is the fire near you? Hello? 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 Hello?
Some calls don't end when the line goes dead. They become a haunting reminder for years to come.
Two epic stories, infinite scares. Tonight I have two true work horror stories that show you there are some very mysterious terrors in our world that you definitely want to avoid. In our first story, an out-of-town meeting leads a man on a drive home through the mountains of Appalachia, but he soon finds himself stranded and not at all alone. And in the second story, a social worker who helps the homeless improve their lives comes across a girl and her dog who are on the run from something that may have killed her friend. Enjoy this nightmare fuel, courtesy of Dead and Roasted. These are tales from the break room. I don't drive through Appalachia anymore. From Talwyn. I've always been creeped out by the Appalachian Mountains. That's especially true after dark. You hear stories from time to time about hikers going missing, and you hear about the ghost towns or forgotten places out there. Stuff you don't want to think about when you're alone in the dark driving through that region. Well, twice a year I have to make this drive for a regional sales meeting. And twice a year I dread it for weeks beforehand. The meeting itself is not the worst. It's boring corporate stuff in a conference town in West Virginia. It's about 8 hours of PowerPoints and sales projections and mandatory team building exercises that everybody has to suffer through. But the drive back, that's what gets me. Hours of driving through winding mountain roads. I've tried to make this part of the trip better. Music playlists and audiobooks. Podcasts too, but it never really takes my mind completely off of it. I'm always aware, even subconsciously, that I'm out here. And if anything happened to my car and I got stranded out here, what would I even do? So even if I was listening to stuff on my phone or through the radio, I found myself thinking and praying that that would never happen. During my most recent fall trip, something happened. It was the time of year where everything gets dark earlier, and the meeting ran late, as usual. My regional manager loves the sound of his own voice and kept us an extra hour going over quotas that we'd already discussed 2 times before. By the time I got on the road, the sun was already setting. I've made the drive a dozen times before, always breathing a sigh of relief when I finally hit the interstate on the other side. I unfortunately knew the drive like the back of my hand. All the places where deer tend to jump out and where cell phone coverage gets a bit spotty. But I apparently didn't know the place well enough, because I didn't know what was out there. 2 hours into the drive back, my car started to make a sound I'd never heard it make before. It was like a stuttering or coughing noise from somewhere under the hood. My first instinct was I was running out of gas, but the gauge showed I had at least half a tank. Then I wondered if I accidentally got the wrong type of gas back at the station. Well, the sound got worse. Then the engine light flicked on, causing my stomach to sink. The car began to lose power, and the accelerator suddenly felt mushy under my foot. "Oh God, no," I muttered, pumping the gas pedal like that would help. "Not here. Not now." The engine coughed again, violent enough to shake the whole car. I managed to pull over to the shoulder just as it died completely, rolling to a stop next to a guardrail that dropped off into invisible darkness. I sat there for a moment in sudden silence, my hands still gripping the wheel hard enough to hurt. The road was empty in both directions, just a narrow strip of asphalt cutting through dense forests. No streetlight out here. They don't waste electricity on roads this remote anyway. No houses I could see, no friendly porch lights in the distance. No signs of civilization except for the fading yellow lines on the pavement and a rusted mile marker that I couldn't read in the dark. I tried the ignition just in case. Nothing but a clicking sound. I tried again and got the same result. The battery was fine, all the lights still worked, but the engine was dead. I pulled out my phone, relieved to see that I had 3 bars. At least something was going right. I called my wife first. She needed to know, and I was happy to hear her voice. "Hey, hon," she answered on the second ring. I could hear our daughter babbling in the background. That sweet nonsense sound 3-month-olds make. "How'd the meeting go?" "It was fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Listen, I broke down on the road in the mountains. I'm probably about halfway back." "Oh no, are you okay? What happened?" "Yeah, I'm okay, just the car died. Started to make a weird noise, then just stopped. I'm gonna call a tow truck, then probably call Brent to see if he could pick me up." "Where exactly are you? Maybe I should come get you." "No," I said quickly. The thought of her driving all the way out here with the baby on these roads in the dark. Absolutely not. "No, I'll be okay. I'll get a tow and a ride. Don't wait up for me. This might take a while, but I'll be home." you sure? You sound worried. I was worried. Something about sitting out here surrounded by nothing but dark trees and empty road. It was setting off every alarm bell in my head. But I wasn't about to tell my wife how scared I was. Just frustrated. I'll text you updates. Give Emmy a kiss for me, okay? We took another minute to say our goodbyes. After we hung up, I felt more alone than ever. I googled tow services in the area. I scrolled through results that were mostly closed for the night. Finally, I found one that advertised 24-hour service. The guy who answered sounded half asleep and not thrilled about the call. He asked which mile marker I remembered seeing last. I did my best to remember, but I hoped telling him that I was 20 minutes from such and such would help. He told me it would be quite the haul and would take him about an hour and a half to get there. I told him that's fine. I didn't really have a choice. He let me know to keep my hazards on and to stay with the car. So I did just that. When I hung up, I thought, an hour and a half alone on this road. Maybe 2 hours. Fantastic. I scrolled down to Brent's contact in my phone. He only lived about 40 minutes away. We'd worked together years ago, and he was one of those guys who dropped everything to help a friend. We've stayed in contact. He's a good guy. I was assuming he would be happy to come get me if he was still awake. Would be much faster than the tow truck driver, and I could just tell the tow truck driver that I got a ride. "Hey man, you busy?" I asked when he picked up. Just watching some TV. What's up? You sound weird." "Well, you're not gonna believe it. My car broke down out here in the middle of the mountains. Is there any chance you can come get me? I called a tow truck, but I'd rather not have to wait that long, and I was interrupted by the sounds of footsteps on leaves. It was coming from the other side of my car. It made me think it was a person the way it was walking. There was a person out here with me. I went quiet and strained to listen, but the footsteps stopped. Yo, man, you still there?" Brent's voice came through the phone. Yeah, I think someone's outside my car," I whispered. "What? Who would be out there?" Brent asked. Good question. We were miles from the nearest town, no houses around. No reason for anyone to be walking along this stretch of road at, I checked the clock, 9:47 at night. "I don't know," I whispered, slowly turning my head to look out the passenger window. There stood a man in the dark. He was only about 3 feet from my car. The sight of him made my whole body go cold. He wore torn, filthy overalls that might have been blue once, but were now the color of dirt and old stains. There was no shirt underneath that I could see. His pale chest was visible through the gaps. His feet were bare, which was nonsensical. It was like 40 degrees out here, and the ground had to be freezing. And his face, well, there was something stretched over it. My brain processed it at first as a mask, maybe a Halloween kind of thing. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized what it actually was. It was the skinned face of an animal of some sort. A hare, I think, though it was hard to tell with the way it was stretched out. The ears hung down on either side of where his human ears would be, and rough holes had been cut for the eyes and mouth. Through those holes, I could see human eyes reflecting the dim light from my dashboard, eyes that were staring directly at me. He wasn't moving. He was standing there watching me through that horrible mask. He had one arm behind his back and the other at his side. His chest was rising and falling with big, deep breaths. There's a man," I said to Brent. My voice was barely above a whisper. Jesus Christ, Brent, he's wearing an animal face. Like a skinned animal face as a mask. He's just standing there staring at me." "What? Are you freaking serious right now?" "Dead serious. The guy just walked out of the woods just now. He's just standing there." Okay, lock your doors. Are they locked already?" I hit the lock button, even though I was pretty sure they were already locked. The click seemed impossibly loud in the silence. The man didn't seem to react. Yeah, they're locked. Good. Maybe he's just... I don't know, maybe he needs help. Maybe his car broke down too. I almost laughed at that. Brent, he's wearing a freaking skinned rabbit face and no shoes. I don't think he has a car. Right, Jesus, okay, I'm getting in my car right now. I'm coming to get you. Just stay calm, don't do anything stupid. I tried to control my breathing. I kept my eyes on the man. He hadn't moved an inch since I noticed him. His hand hung at his side, the other still behind his back. That really creeped me out. Man, he's got one hand behind his back, I told Brent. I could hear Brent starting his car through the phone. What do you mean? I mean he's hiding something behind his back, but I can't see it. Don't engage with him, just stay in the car. Doors locked, windows up. But something made me roll down my window just a crack. I'm sure it was stupid, yeah. I had to try though. Maybe he was just a local weirdo who needed help. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation for this. Heck, maybe he did come to help me. Hello? Do you need anything? Are you okay? I called out. The man didn't respond, but I could hear him breathing now through the crack in the window. Deep and ragged breaths. But he didn't make any move to speak. Sir, can you hear me? Is there something I could do for you? Nothing. Just that horrible breathing and unblinking eyes. I don't think he's okay, I whispered to Brent. He's doing these really deep breaths and he's not moving. How far are you from that one gas station? You know the one I'm talking about. I think about 15 miles, 20? Too far to walk, especially with this guy here. Okay, don't worry about it. I'm gonna do 90 all the way there. I should be there in 30 minutes at most. Should we call the cops? I don't know yet, Brent. Should we wait? And then the man moved, just slightly, shifting his weight from one bare foot to the other. The hand that was visible clenched and unclenched, and his breathing sounded heavier. He's moving, I reported. Acting really weird, more weird, I mean. I think maybe I should just start walking. I don't think I feel safe here. No, man, you're safe inside that car. He can't get into you. But what if he... Click. The sound cut through our conversation like a gunshot. The man had reached out with his visible hand and opened my passenger door. It swung open about 6 inches. Did my lock break? Did it not work anymore? How had that happened? I just locked it, double-checked it even. He left the door open just that much, like a message, as if he was telling me that he could get in whenever he pleased. He just opened my door. Crap, man, I thought you locked it. I did. I don't know what's happening. Oh, crap, I'm coming as fast as I can. 25 minutes, just stay calm. Stay calm, right. There was a man in a rabbit skin face mask holding my door handle, something hidden behind his back, and I was supposed to stay calm. What do you think he wants? I asked Brent, but it sounded more like I was asking myself. The man still hadn't spoken to me, still had barely moved. His breathing was the only sound besides my own panicked heartbeat and Brent's voice giving me updates through the phone. I just passed the creek, still doing 90, hang in there. We stayed like that for the longest minutes of my life. Me in the car and him outside with his hand on my door handle. At any point, he could just yank it fully open and dive in at me. It was like some kind of bizarre standoff. I kept glancing towards his hidden hand. I wanted to know what he was concealing. I needed to know. Was it a knife or a gun? My imagination was going wild. What's happening now? Brent asked. Nothing so far. He's just standing there holding the door. I swear he's probably on drugs or something. PCP makes people do crazy stuff. Maybe. But the way he acted was so calm and steady, like he was in full control of himself, in such control that he could make a subtle threat like that with the door. I glanced at the man again and nearly dropped my phone. He had removed his hand from the door handle. He had it raised up and was holding up 3 fingers. Brent, he's holding 3 fingers up now. Huh? What does that mean? I have no idea. His fingers were dirty, the nails black with grime, but he was holding them steadily. The 3 fingers were raised, like a little kid showing you how old they are. Through the eye holes of that terrible mask, he was still staring at me. I swear to God, I hadn't even seen him blink yet. We watched each other, like predator and prey, and I couldn't be sure which one I was. Then, he lowered 1 finger. Oh, dang man, he just put 1 down. He's counting down. To what? I don't know, Brent. I don't know. My mind raced. I gripped my door handle, but I was afraid to make any sudden move. What was he going to do? Did he actually have a weapon behind his back? And was he about to use it? Was he counting down to give me a chance to run, or would any sudden movement set him off? About another minute passed, the longest minute of my life. I watched those 2 fingers like they were a bomb timer, waiting for the next one to drop. The man's breathing got heavier, almost panting now. And then, the 2nd finger lowered. Brent, he's down to 1. Look, man, I'm almost 15 minutes, maybe 12 minutes from there. I'm flying, dude, running every light, every stop sign. 1 finger. Pale and dirty and terrible. If I didn't know any better, the man's breathing didn't sound like panting, it sounded more like excitement. And through the mouth hole of the mask, I could see the hint of teeth. Was he smiling? I gotta do something, man. I can't just sit here and wait for whatever. I'm telling you, dude, don't get out of that car. But what if... Then 3 things happened at once. The final finger went down. The phone call instantly dropped, and it sounded like the man laughed. Frantically, I looked up my phone and began to press buttons, but nothing happened. It was like the battery died, even though I swear I had plenty of battery. That's impossible. Phones don't just die out of nowhere. I looked back at the man, and I'd never been more sure that he was smiling. He began to raise his hand back up, and he brought up his 3 fingers again. No, I said out loud. No, 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 please, no. He was going to count down again. And this time, I had no phone, no Brent as my lifeline, no idea how close help was or wasn't. I was completely alone with whatever was about to happen. I was trapped. If I ran, where would I even go? The woods on either side were pitch black and might be full of his friends. The road stretched empty in both directions, no guarantee of finding help before he caught up to me. And if I tried to get out, he could just lunge in before I was able to. We'd established that. He lowered a finger. 2. I had to do something, anything. Fighting him seemed like my only option, but with what? I looked around desperately. Then I saw something. In the pocket of my door, there was a forgotten metal tumbler that I'd once used for my water kick, back when I was trying to do 8 cups of water a day. I had just left it in my car and never brought it back inside. I would use that if the unspeakable happened. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Then, another finger went down. 1 more left. My heart felt like it was going to overload. This was it. Whatever he'd been counting toward, it was about to happen. I put my hand on my door handle. ready to burst out and grab that tumbler at the same time for the final confrontation. It was the worst plan, but it was all I had. "Please," I said, loud enough that I was sure he could hear me. "Please don't do this. Whatever you're planning to do, please. I have a wife, a newborn daughter at home. She's only 3 months old. Her name is Amelia. We call her Emmy. She just started to smile last week. Real smiles, not just gas. I just want to see them again, please. I'll give you anything, my wallet, my car, whatever you want. Just please let me go home." The man tilted his head slightly, that awful rabbit face cocking to one side. I was actually surprised he moved in response at all. Was he considering my words? The one finger stayed up. For a moment I wondered, did I get through to him? Maybe there was something human under that mask after all. His breathing went quiet too, and I couldn't see that smile anymore. There was something in his eyes. Recognition, maybe pity. Then headlights swept around the bend behind us. The man's head snapped toward the light, and it made me jump. In that moment, I looked at the lights too. And when I looked back, all I saw was the man's back as he disappeared into the woods, and something long and dark in the hand he had been hiding the entire time. Brent arrived in his beat-up Tahoe just in time. I was so happy to see him I could have hugged him right there. But I couldn't move. I stayed in the car, and before long Brent was at my window. He had a tire iron in his hand, and he was looking around wildly. "Where's the guy? I didn't see anyone coming in." I pointed toward the woods. "He ran off when he saw your lights." "Good. All right, we gotta go, man. Get in my car." I struggled to undo my seatbelt. "Jesus, man, you're shaking like a leaf. What happened? When the call disconnected, what happened?" I told him everything he missed as we went to his car. He believed me. He seemed to feel bad that I went through all that. "And you never saw what he had behind his back?" "Yeah, but just a glimpse. It was long and dark, but could have been anything, really." We didn't wait for the tow truck. We drove away, and I called the tow truck number again. The same man picked up, and I let him know that I got a ride, and he could take my vehicle, and I would come to pick it up later, after it's been fixed, obviously. I got a call from a mechanic once they fixed it. Said it was the strangest thing. Looked like my fuel line had been shredded somehow. Asked if I remembered running over anything. I told him I didn't. I had no idea how my fuel line would have gotten in that state. I still have to make that drive twice a year. I leave at dawn now, though, making absolutely sure I'm off the mountain before dark. I keep my tank full, my phone charged, and a weapon within reach. I've tried to get the company to let me do virtual meetings, but they insist on doing this face-to-face. So I go, but I watch those woods the whole time. And if we have to stay late, and I can't make it through the woods before dark, then I just stay at a hotel. My wife is very understanding of that matter. It follows. From Amari. I'm a social worker assigned to work within a bustling downtown public library in a West Coast city. My clients are primarily unhoused individuals, and I work closely with dozens of them throughout the week during the library's open hours. I began my career as an intern in the social work program while attending the nearby state university, working under a field instructor at the same library location while earning my Bachelor of Social Works degree. I decided to continue serving clients at this location after graduating, and I've been assigned there for the past 2 years. I'd like to preface this account with an acknowledgement that, given the sensitive nature of our line of work, maintaining anonymity is essential. Therefore, I'll provide only the minimal amount of details about the client involved to respect their privacy and ensure confidentiality. With that being said, I begin my strange tale. The incident in question occurred during my time as a social work intern. I admit that I was inexperienced, and I took on more than I could handle. In those early days, I suffered from what one might call job creep, as my efforts as an eager, ambitious student steadily shifted into other responsibilities that went beyond my assigned duties. After entering the program and being unceremoniously thrust into the field at the library, I formed an attitude of subservience to my career. This manifested as working longer hours than I should have, sacrificing my health and well-being daily, all with the belief that I was living up to some sort of martyred state of being. In some ways, this could be interpreted as both self-destructive and somewhat egocentric. I'm still very passionate about what I do, but I realize now, following the events that occurred more than 2 years ago, how important it is to recognize when I'm crossing a line and need to move away from playing hero. Because, in this case, it almost got me hurt. Or worse. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. The social work program at the library is a critical service for many of its unhoused patrons. The library itself is an essential third space for the community, especially in the brutal heat of summer when the temperatures hit triple digits, and the merciless onset of winter when it dips well below freezing at night. My clients' cases vary greatly. Some are seeking assistance with housing or obtaining access to health care, while others request mental health services, counseling, or employment guidance. Demand for social workers is consistently high, and appointments are often fully booked. However, at certain times of the day, walk-ins can be accommodated. Our small office is located on the 4th floor of the library, which is a busier part of the library as there is also a computer lab and ample seating for patrons to rest and utilize the library's space. Library staff perform a lot of the heavy lifting and are vital in fielding our clients' requests for appointments and also guiding them towards seeking our services during our walk-in hours. One night on a bitterly cold evening in early December, a few days before our winter break, all of the interns, including myself, were looking forward to closing up the office. It was nearing the end of a long, albeit productive day. After the other interns left, our site supervisor told me she was headed upstairs to file away some documents, and then would be heading home. I stayed behind to finish organizing a thick stack of paperwork from my last client. I was deep in concentration, sifting through forms that all began to meld into a blurred mess, when I was interrupted by a knock at the door. One of the library assistants, a quiet young woman whose name I could never recall, opened the door and asked if I had time to see one more walk-in. She then added in a soft voice that the request seemed urgent. Being the overachieving intern that I was, I agreed to see the client. The client was a young woman who would not provide me with her age, but was most likely in her late teens or early 20s. She had a dog with her, an older, medium-sized pup who was well-behaved and stuck closely to her side. When she entered the office, I immediately sensed a strong amount of tension radiating from her, as if she was inwardly coiled into a tight ball, ready to snap out of place at any moment. At first, she refused to make eye contact with me, electing to instead peer around the room. It appeared that she was gauging the level of danger of the space. I was not surprised at all by her behavior. It's something I see every day. Many young women living on the streets encounter horrors that most of us will never know. My initial impression of her was that she had seen many terrible things, encountered the worst kind of humanity daily, and did not trust a single person. After inviting her to take a seat at the table in the corner of the office, and taking the chair opposite her, I introduced myself and asked for her name. She muttered her first name, which I will not disclose. Going forward, I'll instead refer to her as Jill. As for her dog, I will also protect his privacy and call him Jack. I began our conversation by running through the standard intake form, which I complete with every client at the beginning of our consultation. It covers general questions regarding our client's personal history, contact information, and current needs. It's a very standard, somewhat impersonal form, and I typically try to breeze through it as quickly as possible to get to the heart of the client's needs. Namely, I want to know what brings them to us. How can we help? Jill did not want to provide me with much information up front, and she avoided answering many of the questions during the intake. Her eyes darted back and forth around the room and often fell to the open doorway behind me. I kept thinking, was she seeing something that I couldn't, or watching for someone to burst from around the corner? "So, Jill," I said with a smile, setting my clipboard on the table with the mostly empty intake form. "What brings you in today?" Jill paused her scanning of the room and doorway to look at me, her deep-set eyes settling on mine. I noticed that there were dark gray circles under her eyes. It looked like she hadn't slept at all in days. She bent down and pulled Jack into her lap, who happily obliged her and licked the bottom of her chin. "Something is following me," she murmured, and at first I thought I had misheard her. "I'm sorry? Did you say that someone is following you?" I asked, opting for the possibility that I had misinterpreted what she said. "No," she said, and looked away for a moment, lost in thought. "Something," she finally repeated, and met my eyes again. I felt my smile waver slightly, and fought to keep my eyebrows from furrowing. I'm often told I wear my heart on my sleeve, and this night I was struggling to keep my confusion from showing. She studied me, seeming to take my silence as an invitation to continue. I noted inwardly that she was very brave, given her apparent emotional state. Something had rattled her to her core, but she felt like it was important to talk about it. "I have a good friend out here," she began quietly. "She says her name is Jim, but I know that isn't her real name. We've been friends since I got here about a year ago. We met at the library. When she's around, she watches my back and I watch hers. She has a tent, and we sometimes sleep in the park or at the river, taking turns so one of us can keep a lookout." She paused for a moment and swallowed hard, then moved to set Jack back down on the ground. It seemed that, at this point, even her dog would not be able to offer her comfort. I could sense her anxiety radiating off of her. It was so palpable. "About a week ago, we were at the river late at night. A little while after I went to sleep in the tent, Jim woke me up. She was freaked out and shaking. She told me that she saw something. Something she couldn't explain, off past the field in the shadows of the trees. She kept pointing to it, but my vision is bad at night, and I couldn't see anything that far away. She wanted to leave right then, so we did. We packed up everything and walked to that park on the edge of town. Jim told me she wasn't going to be able to sleep, and that she'd stay up and keep watching." Jill paused for a breath and then shivered slightly. "Whatever it was that Jim saw, it followed us. A few hours later, right before sunup, she woke me up again and said it was back, and pointed at it when I came out of the tent." Did you see it, whatever it was?" I asked. "No," she replied, and scrunched up her eyebrows as if frustrated. "No, I couldn't see it at all. Not that night, at least." Jill looked like she was on the verge of tears, but continued. "No, at first I couldn't see it, and Jack here kept right on sleeping, so I thought maybe Jim was on something, hallucinating or dreaming. But the way she described it, it scared me." "What did she say it looked like?" I pressed her as gently as I could, my curiosity piqued. "She said it wasn't a person. She said it was crawling and walking like it could stand, but just for a second. But it mostly moved like a cat, sort of. A tall cat that could stand up on its back legs. It would go back and forth between standing and crawling really fast-like, and it stayed out of the light. After that, she barely slept at all for days. At night, she stayed awake outside the tent, waiting for it to show up. And when it did, she would wake me up and we would move over to another spot. It made me afraid. Did it ever come close to you? I asked. Jill shook her head. After a few nights, Jim told me she didn't want to sleep out in the open anymore. She said she wanted to sleep somewhere inside, like in an abandoned building or even in the tunnels. The tunnels, I thought grimly to myself. The tunnels were a sprawling underground network of passageways that lay beneath the city, which were largely inaccessible, except to thrill-seeking tour groups or those desperate enough to seek shelter within their catacomb-like depths. I told her I didn't want to do that, Jill said, her voice wavering. I don't like the tunnels. I hear that all sorts of horrible things happen there to people like me, she finished, her voice trailing off. So what happened after that? I asked. Jim got upset with me, told me that it was stupid to stay outside with that thing following us. Though, at the time, I still didn't see it. So she left. She said after the third night that she had had enough. She would take her stuff and stay in the tunnels at night, and that I could either come with her or not. You decided not to go with her? Yeah, I still didn't completely believe something was following us. I didn't think she had any reason to lie to me. I thought she was being paranoid. I thought what she was doing was dangerous, holing up in the tunnels like that. People disappear there, she said, then looked up at me. I haven't seen her since, she said, and I saw tears begin to well up in her eyes. I usually see her around here, in the library during the day, or at least at the park in the mornings when the church groups give out meals. I think something's happened to her. Something bad. I think whatever that thing is, it got her. A chill ran down my spine, even though I was having a difficult time believing this myself. I could tell Jill had been through a lot out there, and I was sure her friend had as well. But there must have been some sort of rational explanation for this. Have you contacted the police? I suggested. Jill gave me a look like I had suddenly put on a clown costume and pirouetted around the room. Of course she hadn't contacted the police, her look told me, like they would be of any help at all. They don't care about the unhoused. My chest tightened at the stark truth of that notion. Have you tried staying in the shelters? There's a woman's shelter a few blocks from here. I know it's full at the moment, but I'm happy to get you on the waiting list, I offered, attempting to steer her towards a path that involved something I could help her with as a social worker. I don't stay in shelters. Bad things happen there too, she replied solemnly. I nodded, understanding exactly what she was saying without the need for her to spell it out. Even though shelters, which the name implies, grant some semblance of protection from the outside, they're also notorious for not always offering protection on the inside. I've heard many horror stories from my clients and fellow social workers, and some people choose to avoid them and stay out in the elements instead. After some deliberating to myself while Jill sat there, mulling over her thoughts, I asked her, "Are you interested in housing assistance? There is a housing choice voucher program. I'm happy to walk you through signing up for that, or..." I began, but she cut me off. "No, I don't want any of that. I don't want to stay here. I can't stay here," she said, then blew out a big sigh as if she was holding her breath for a few moments and forgot she needed to breathe. "I've seen it," she said, her voice so low I could barely hear her. "You've seen it?" I said slowly, now unsure of where this would lead us. "Yes," she replied. "Last night, I saw it near the old part of town, by the bridge. I was looking for Jim over there. There's an opening that leads to the tunnels next to the docks. Jim showed me once. I thought I'd check near there to see if I could spot her or her tent. But when I got close to the river, I saw it, off by the walkway under the bridge. I looked at her with my eyebrows raised. I'm sure she could sense my doubt. I swear to you, she said, obviously exasperated with me. It was exactly like how Jim described it. It was slinking around, cat-like, but too big to be any cat. It was dark, so it was kind of hard to see, but it was close enough for me to see it this time. It was skinny and very tall. At first it was standing up, and I think it spotted me, and then it fell to the ground and crawled on all fours, moving straight towards me. I was holding on to Jack, and he began to bark like crazy and tried to jump out of my arms. I wasn't gonna wait for it to get us. We got the heck out of there. And after I ran a few blocks and ducked into an alley, a few hours later I saw it again. It followed me. It was in one of the alleyways across from where I was, slinking around, watching me from the dark places where it was hard to see. But I knew it was there, just as sure as Jim was sure that it was there. That and Jack was growling and his hackles were up, she said, and bent down to scratch behind his ears. I found myself shaking my head, finding this all very hard to digest. A strange creature stalking this young woman and her friend. I've heard plenty of unusual tales during the short time I was in the internship program, but this one was by far the most bizarre. It sounded like something straight out of a B horror movie, and not at all based in reality. Jill, I want to help you, I truly do, but I don't know how I can help in my capacity as a social worker with this. I need help getting out of here. I can't stay here, it's going to get me like it got Jem, she said, her despondency made clear through the falling intonation of her voice. I'll see what I can do. I've helped others get bus passes, but where would you go? I have an aunt who lives along the coast up north. If I get there, I know she'd take me in, Jill explained. I'll try, but I can't guarantee that I can help. To square away the funding through our program for something like that, I'd have to get special approval from my site supervisor, and Jill looked at me with pure desperation, which washed over her features. Please, you're the only person who can help me get out of here. I'm scared about what might happen to me. Please. I sighed, holding Jill's gaze. Okay, Jill. I'll do my best. After some gentle persuading, I was able to get Jill to provide me with the number for her cell phone. She said it sometimes died because of a faulty battery, but then assured me she would do her best to keep it charged and close to her. I told her I would speak to my site supervisor the next morning and call Jill to update her about the bus ticket. I then asked her about what she planned to do that night, where she intended to stay. I'm not sleeping at all tonight. I'm just going to keep moving, was Jill's grave reply, as she picked up Jack and made her way out of the office. At that, an uncomfortable anxiousness began to settle in the pit of my stomach, and I genuinely felt worried for her. The next morning, prior to diving into our first round of appointments for the day, I pulled my site supervisor aside and explained Jill's situation to her in very general terms. Of course, I kept out the part about the strange creature she claimed was following her, but I managed to frame her situation into a believable story about being followed, her friend disappearing, and her wanting to leave the city immediately to reconnect with family elsewhere. Upon hearing my explanation, my site supervisor shook her head and told me that the social work program for the library was already facing budget cuts, and securing the funding needed for a bus ticket, especially for that amount, would not be feasible. She told me the best we could provide were regional transit day passes, but that was the extent of what we could offer through our program. After talking to my supervisor, the library opened, and I was inundated with appointments, which kept me busy up until my lunch hour. After lunch, I had a brief lull in appointments and took the opportunity to call Jill to let her know about the bus passes. The call went to voicemail, so I left a message explaining to Jill about her limited options. I didn't think much about it after that, until a couple of hours later, when, during an appointment with another client, I received a phone call from Jill. As I stepped away from the client to take the call, I could hear the telltale sounds of heavy traffic in the background, and Jill sounded out of breath. "It's Jill," she said. It sounded like she had been crying, and her voice was breaking as she spoke. "Hey, Jill, I left you a message, but I wasn't able to get you a bus ticket. Our funding has been..." I started, and Jill cut me off. "It came back," she said, and I could tell from her tone that she was frightened beyond belief. "It came back last night, and Jack ran away," she continued, and started to cry. Static began to come through the phone. "Oh no, Jill, I'm so sorry. I've got to go find him, and we'll both get out." "Jill, did you hear me? I wasn't able to get the ticket." She rambled, and it was starting to become more and more difficult to understand what she was saying through the buzzing noise. "Jill, if you can hear me, wait for me in Old Town near the entrance. Do not go into the tunnels. I'll meet you there. I'll help you find Jack." I heard myself say the words, and my heart began to pound furiously in my chest as I realized what I was doing, what I was getting myself into. "Jill, if you can hear me, please wait for me. I'll be there after the library closes," I said. And then, after a short period of hearing nothing but the crackling sounds of static, the line disconnected. Although I tried calling her back, she didn't pick up again. The rest of the day, I was on edge and very worried about Jill. I was afraid she didn't hear me and would attempt to find Jack herself without waiting for me. I feared that something would happen to her. About an hour before the end of my shift, as the light outside began to wane, I went to my site supervisor and told her that I needed to leave early for an urgent matter. After hastily packing up my belongings and exiting the library, I headed in the direction of Old Town, which was about 5 blocks away. Along the way, I decided to take a slight detour and pull money out of the ATM for Jill's bus ticket, committed to the idea that I was helping someone who otherwise would receive no help, who may end up hurt, missing, or worse, because no one else would give the time of day to someone in her situation. Again, that job creep reared its head, but I knew it was what I had to do. By the time I reached the entrance to Old Town, dusk had already settled across the city, and the shadows of the old buildings began to stretch and fill in the spaces where the light could no longer reach. I looked around for Jill, hopeful that it would be as easy as her hearing what I said on the phone and just waiting there. But of course, that was not the case. I stood at the archway that was adjacent to the wide underpass that connected the modern part of the city to Old Town. It was a weekday, and the usual crowds of tourists were not there. There were very few people scattered around the area, some couples casually holding hands as they headed off for a quiet dinner. But for more than an hour, there was still no sign of Jill. It was now completely dark outside, and almost half an hour past the time that I told her to meet me at the entrance. I contemplated taking a look around the storefronts or poking my head into some of the alleyways that were scattered throughout. As I was peering around, thinking about my next steps, I spotted him. Jack. He was far away, but I recognized him instantly. He was running full speed down the street to the south in the direction of the river. I took off after him, my work bag slamming against my side as I jogged to catch him. By the time I reached the end of the street, where it dead-ended into the beginnings of the docks that lined that side of the river, I could hear frantic yipping coming from underneath the bridge. It was coming from the area closest to the river, where the darkness was thickest and obscured the view of the walkways. I followed the sounds of the dog, and after a moment of panicked searching, attempting to pinpoint the exact location of Jack, I found him. He was underneath one of the tall docks next to the bridge, his small form shaking from the force of his barking. He looked to be facing a shadowy area that led into a dark space I could not distinguish from that angle. I made my way closer to the docks and turned down a ramp that appeared to lead to where he was. While on the ramp, I lost sight of him for a moment. That's when I heard a blood-curdling yelp, and Jack suddenly went silent. "Jack?" I cried out, and ran over to the area where I last saw him. He wasn't there, and all I could see was an inky, depthless opening that looked to have once been boarded up, but the boards had been removed and unceremoniously scattered around. This was the entrance to the tunnels that Jill told me about. I realized as I felt my blood pressure rise and could hear the rhythmic thumping of my heartbeat in my ears. I approached the mouth of the tunnel, debating with myself as to whether I should enter and try to find Jack, or if I should leave and continue my search for Jill. And then, I heard a familiar voice call from deep within the passage. It sounded distant and was echoing, but I knew it was Jill, and she sounded frantic, like she was struggling against something. Throwing all my fears and thoughts of caution aside, I pulled out my cell phone and shook it to activate the flashlight. Then I hurried down the tunnel. The ground was uneven, with trash and chunks of rock scattered about. Overhead, the concrete ceiling was cracked and stained with patches of sinister rust-colored spots. The light of my flashlight bounced as I jogged, filling the passageway with disjointed shadows that resembled figures hiding behind the brick columns that lined the walls. The air reeked of mildew and was bitingly cold, and I could see my breath in puffs of mist that obscured my vision. After a moment, I heard Jill again. This time, she let out a distressing yell that sounded like, "No!" "Jill, where are you?" I cried out, my voice rough from breathing hard. I heard Jill's voice once more, and she sounded closer, perhaps only 20 or 30 feet away. But with the effect the tunnel had on the acoustics of the space, it was difficult to tell exactly how far away she was and what she was saying. After taking a few more strides forward, I reached a part of the tunnel that opened into a wide space, dotted with stone columns and partially torn down walls. The room was so sprawling that past a certain point, all I could see was pitch black beyond the scattered columns surrounding me. Just then, I heard a piercing yip and looked to my right to see Jill, huddled on the ground in a heap, facing me, her back pressed against a collapsed brick wall. She was holding Jack protectively in her lap, and there was a small flashlight on the ground next to her, its beam emitting only a waning glow. The light from my phone shone over her form and revealed her horrified expression. She was staring at something in my direction, but looking directly behind me, her face suggesting that she was about to scream. Jack was growling and looking in the same direction as Jill. I followed their gazes and slowly began to turn around, the light of my phone following my movement. When the light settled on the elongated form that towered before me, Jill uttered a blood-curdling scream. Before I could register what stood in front of me, it moved with unnatural speed, dropping to all fours and disappearing behind the column next to me. I shrieked and stumbled backwards, almost toppling over Jill in the process. I caught myself and shone my phone back towards where I last saw the figure. But I found nothing, just the column and the eerie shadow that it cast in the light. Jill was hyperventilating and saying, "No, no, no," repeatedly, in a state of absolute terror. Jack still clutched in her arms. "Where is it?" I whispered harshly, mostly to myself, and cast my phone around, frantically searching for any sign of whatever it was that was down there with us. I took a step away from Jill, scanning the space to the right of where I saw that figure disappear. Then I heard movement again, coming from behind the wall where Jill was sitting. I pointed my light at the hole in the crumbling wall where she sat, where a window frame used to be, and at the same time Jill looked up above her. There in the hole, leaning out and over Jill, stood the impossibly lean, tall creature, its dreadfully stretched, nebulous face peering over her, a string of drool oozing from the slit that stood in place of its mouth. I could hear a faint hiss emanating from it, and it cocked its head slightly, its long, tangled hair almost brushing the top of Jill's head. We both screamed at the same time, and Jill crawled away from the creature, dragging Jack away and up as she staggered clumsily to her feet. "Run!" I gasped breathlessly, and Jill began to run in the direction of the exit. I looked back at the hole and realized in horror that the creature was gone again. I sped out a curse and turned around to follow Jill when something heavy slammed into my leg, making me stumble. I cried out, then took my work bag and swung it hard as I could, in the direction of the creature, yelling as I did so. The bag connected with it, and the strap broke, sending the bag and its contents sailing across the space. I wasted no time in reorienting myself and took off sprinting in the direction of the tunnel. I could hear Jill crying and stumbling along ahead of me, doing her best to run away in the pitch black. I caught up to her, my light haphazardly shining the way, as we ran full speed down the passageway. I heard the creature behind us emit an unearthly wail, and then heard the sounds of scampering echoing in the direction we came from. After ages, I felt the brisk breeze of the outside air, and together Jill and I emerged from the opening of the tunnel and out near the river. We kept running, up the ramp and onto the street of Old Town, where people were still meandering and window shopping in the chilly night air, oblivious to the ordeal we had just endured a moment ago. We didn't stop running until we reached the brightly lit storefront near the main archway of Old Town. By then, we were out of breath and panting, including Jack, who was still clutched in Jill's arms. People stared at us as we stood there catching our breaths, and Jill staggered over to a nearby bench, collapsing onto it, setting Jack next to her as she grabbed at her side and rested her head against the wall of the building. We didn't say anything for some time, and I wasn't sure how to even bring up with her what we had just encountered. Did that actually happen? What was that thing? Was it even human? A torrent of questions flooded my mind. Finally, Jill spoke up and told me that she was leaving that night, that she would take a local bus out of the city and figure it out from there. That's when I offered her the cash that I pulled out from the ATM for the bus ticket and told her to use the money to get to her aunt. We didn't talk about what we saw. I think it was because we were too in shock at the moment to fully process what we encountered. We parted ways shortly after that, after I walked with her back to the center of downtown and waited for her to get on a bus. Before getting on the bus, she thanked me and told me that she would be okay. I don't know exactly what happened to Jill after she left that night. I once received a postcard in my work inbox that was addressed to me, just my first name, because I never provided my full name to my clients, with a vibrant photo of a coastal town and picturesque cliffs and cutesy little shops. There was nothing written on the postcard other than my name, but I'd like to think that it was from Jill. As for Jim, her missing friend, I didn't have a full name or anything to provide the police to try to figure out if she was missing or not, so I'll never know what happened to her. That's the way it goes for many unhoused people who go missing. It's often not reported to the police, and they fall into a void, never to be seen again. Or if they're found, eventually, it's often in the worst possible way. In retrospect, while I know I could have handled the situation more professionally, ultimately, I'm glad I didn't. If I did everything by the book, Jill would have likely become another person to disappear with no trace and with no one to care. I hope that my client's story will help shed light on the dangers that are ever present in the often treacherous world that is the life of an unhoused individual. Please, if you have it in you, take it upon yourself to view this story from a place of empathy and compassion. At least, that is my hope for you as a reader or a listener of this tale. There are some real weirdos out there, But I've noticed something. Whenever someone's wearing an animal mask, it's never like a large version of a gerbil or hamster face. What's that about? I think a giant hamster face could be scary. Something that dumb and hungry looking at you. That would GB my heebies for sure. Good night. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tales from the Break Room. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails. Follow me on X at Dark Prevails. Check out my